I seem to remember like a marriage proposal in there or something like that.
Yeah, we were in this small shop, and so I ended up having beers with this guy and his brother, and the conversation transitioned to, are you single, and where's your husband, and this and that, and they offered me, I think a cow or something, and I had to refuse it because...
I mean, I don't even know why you'd have to have the second part of that sentence. You said I had to refuse it because. I don't even think you need the because, do you? I mean...
Well, it was a large animal. I think it was a cow.
It's time for another episode of Charbroiled Chats.
So Amie's the kind of person, like, you know how I'm really afraid of heights and I have this obsession with mountaineering disasters, right? So Amie's the kind of person where, like, I would say something like, oh my God, in that expedition they were on Everest and it was like minus 43. And Amie would just say something like, well, I didn't find it that cold. And we'd be like, Amie, you've climbed Everest. Well, I had to use oxygen. Like, this is the kind of person that Amie is. You just find out, like, she's done everything at some point, and she's quite, relatively young, right? You're quite young.
I guess so, yeah.
Well, when I met you, it was, 8 years ago or so? Yeah, about 8 years ago. So, you were younger then, but still, to me, you're still young.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What's your idea of travel, Amie? Is it a passion? Is it a sideline? Is it a hobby?
It's probably the only thing in my life that I don't bother to justify, in the sense that I feel like it's something that just has intrinsic value for me, and it always has, and it's never a question of whether I will or I won't. It's like almost a need for me to just travel, to stay in places for a long time and reap all the benefits of meeting new people and getting the perspective. I think I'm very sensitive to my physical surroundings. I get a lot of positive things out of changing my physical location.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What kind of travel are we talking about? How would you classify it? Adventure travel? Aesthetic travel? I don't know.
Well, it's both for you, right? You've done both.
It's travel for the sake of experience. I guess some of my longer trips I've taken were, I guess, for business, in a sense. I wanted to start my career working in international development. I spent quite a bit of time in Uganda and traveled to a few different countries in the area while I was over there. And that was probably the longest time that I was away, just continuously. So I was in Uganda for about 5 or 6 months, and then I came home for a month. After that, I went back, and I didn't stay in Uganda for the entire time, but I stayed abroad for a little over a year. So that was like probably the biggest stretch of time where I fit in the most of my travel. But I traveled quite a bit before then.
Haven't you counted once, like you've been to 30 countries or something like that?
Yeah, you know what? In preparation, I did make a list so I could get like an actual count.
Yeah.
It's held pretty steady at about 30. I mean, 29 if I don't include Canada. So I did go...
Canada's another country.
It is, but I don't feel like I've seen enough of it to really count it. It's like so big. I did Toronto, of course, because we're so close. Montreal, which was beautiful.
Yeah, I love Montreal.
When you said we were going to talk about travel, I knew Amie was a traveler, but I was thinking myself, I haven't done any travel since I was...
You haven't?
Really young. That's not the plain old business travel or standard tourism. I didn't like it, but that's all I would do. I always wanted to take the adventure route, just pick a country and get off the plane and see what happened, but never.
Yeah, I regret that too, not doing more of that, no doubt. Well, another thing was so with Amie, it wasn't so much just travel, but remember the book that you told me you had this list, and I said, you got to make a book out of this. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the list has several names, one of which is the top 10 stupidest things I've ever done, the top 10 ways I could have died. There's so many variations of it, and most of them.
And so the number one was the one with the motorcycle trip too, where, right? Can you relate that one? Was that that one is so...
You know, one of the things that I miss about, you know, doing these longer trips or just the spirit of my 20s was just the general lack of fear, which I think was a bit unfounded in quite a lot of cases. But, you know, I would get these things in my head that I would have as like a curiosity, or I would want to... Like, I think the premise of the trip that you're referring to was that I wanted to go to a refugee camp and, like, quote unquote, check it out. Like, this was a very younger version of myself.
Where was this camp?
So it was Western Uganda. I was curious about what was actually going on. I wanted to talk to people, and I wanted to see if there were any opportunities for me to do any kind of work, volunteer or otherwise. My methods were very poor, but I ended up finding someone through a friend of a friend who would take me across the border to the DRC, and it was, how do I say this? The region was controlled by a group that wasn't the government, and I just very flippantly, like, crossed the border with this gentleman on the back of her motorcycle with no helmet, of course. I got stamped out of Uganda. I got, you know, quote unquote, stamped in. It was quite the experience. I definitely, looking back, I think it was, you know, insanely stupid in a lot of ways. But anyway.
Was there, I seem to remember like a marriage proposal in there or something like that.
Yeah, I ended up doing a tour on the back of the motorbike with the gentleman that was in charge of the region, and his brother was also in charge of the national park area. And so when the bike tour ended, we were in this small shop, and so I ended up having beers with this guy and his brother, and they were talking about you know, the national park and how beautiful it is. And then the conversation transitioned to, you know, are you single, and where's your husband, and this and that, and, you know, sort of selling the brother as also being single, and, you know, maybe something could happen there. And that was definitely a moment where I was like, it really, really dawned on me, like, this could get very bad very quickly. But fortunately for me, it didn't. And, you know, at the end, when I was getting ready to leave, because it was only, I mean, it was just not even a span of a full day, but they offered me, I think, a cow or something, and I had to refuse it because it was a large animal. I think it was a cow.
I mean, I don't even know why you'd have to have the second part of that sentence. You said I had to refuse it because. I don't even think you need the because, do you? I mean...
Well, I mean, normally I would try
to take the cow.
To, you know, graciously accept, you know, because that's like, it's a, you know, it was a very nice gesture. It was very important. And so, you know, I didn't want to refuse it, but I had taken a bus, like a few buses and I was like, there's no way I can transport a cow back to where I'm staying, which was like in eastern Uganda. So, and then, you know, and then another offer was like, you know, for me to come back and, you know, for them to make a chicken for us to share, which would have been great. But I think, you know, after that, fear struck me probably several hours later than it should have. I was like, maybe none of this was a great idea. And so I just returned.
I mean, that's what I mean about your stories, right? I mean, a lot of women have stories where they're like, oh God, you know, like I was on the beach in Fort Lauderdale and these dudes came up with their boat and we got on the boat, and later on we're like, why did we get on the boat with them? But your story is like 8 times more interesting and intriguing, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think I really took things to the extreme in that era of my life. Actually, just telling that story, it's so weird to tell it now because I think, you know, in normal conversation, I think, you know, I might tell it a little differently, or not necessarily like the details being different, but, you know, I found that when I was telling, I was like very conscious of, you know, other people who don't know me, like, you know, hearing it. And, you know, I definitely had some moments mid speaking where I was like, this is super cringe, but I don't know. I mean, I think that's it. Like, you know, it was such a gift to be able to travel and do all these things, and a total gift to have made it out alive and well, and, you know, even serious situations and tragic situations, I think, you know, it just sort of runs in my family to, like, make jokes out of them, or, you know, make it an entertaining story. But, you know, there's so much of the gravity of what was going on in that region that, you know, I definitely didn't do it justice with, you know, the sort of flippant telling of that story. But,
I know what you're saying.
There's real people, and there was real violence in that region, and a lot of real things.
Is fear part of the equation? Are you ever concerned as a young woman in a foreign country? Does that enter your thinking, or are you just completely open to? Because I'm a big, strong man, and I don't know that I'd go on a motorcycle trip in Uganda.
Yeah, and Amie, you should know that, like, Walt is not, well, in some ways he's extremely wimpy. But but anyway, this is our dynamic. But anyway, like he used to race cars and stuff. So he's not, you know, he says he wouldn't go on a motorcycle trip, but he'd race cars at 200 miles an hour around a track. So he's not, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, it's just the idea that it's a different thing with a woman. I think you have to say that.
Yeah, you know, you're right.
So is that part of your thing, Amie? Does it ever enter your head that maybe I'll back off on this?
I think in that era of my life, I was extremely open, and I had at that point been in Uganda for quite a while, and I had a really good experience. I think I was really desensitized at that point to, you know, having what people might have as like a common sense of foreignness, or feeling like a huge separation. Of course, like, you know, I was well aware of my foreignness but yeah, I mean, I've definitely felt physically threatened, you know, traveling around the world. Like, I've been robbed, I've been assaulted, but not necessarily like in like a hugely traumatizing for me, or, you know, any kind of sustainable physical consequences way. But
you think Americans are conditioned to be afraid in foreign lands?
That's an interesting question. My mom and I went to Italy once, right? And sometimes I think like that fear comes from, well, I think it comes if you're maybe more like a certain age. Maybe maybe older people are more conditioned in that way, but I don't know. But I remember when we went, my mom's friends, all, you know, the old Italians, they were like, be careful, watch your wallet and your purse, be careful of the gypsies, you know, which is like a pejorative term anyway. I believe they're Roma, right? So like in Italy, like every so often I'd see her like looking around. I'm like, Mom, I don't think there are any gypsies here. And like we met my brother in a hotel in Rome, and she didn't know he was coming. And so he kind of like walked up behind her, and she was like thinking someone was robbing her. And I'm like, I wish your friends had not said this to you. It's just,
I think,
so
you know,
ridiculous.
there's an urge to create a story, and when you have a group of people that look different from you, or of a different, you name it, religion, economic background, you know, whatever, you know, there's also this lack of information and the desire to like fill in the blanks. And, you know, if it fits in with feelings of fear, whether it's because of the circumstance of, you know, being away from your home, or definitely like, you know, just
it's
insecurity.
Probably even stronger then.
Yeah, I think so. I think it all sort of layers on top of itself.
Well, it's so funny though. Again, with that Italy trip, I came back feeling like everyone on that trip was trying to cheat me. Like we were in the train station in Naples, right? And we're lugging suitcases, and this dude comes up to us and's like, "Oh, let me help you." And he's got this thing that looks like a train person uniform, right? And so he puts the stuff on the train. I'm like, "Oh, let me give you a tip." And he looks at it, he's like, "Not enough." Like in a very threatening way. And I'm like, "Okay, let me get you some more." And he wasn't a train employee, right? He was just like a scammer. And then I just remember being in a restaurant somewhere where they totally shortchanged me. I mean, obviously. And there were a couple other things that I just felt, it was just so weird because, my background is all Italian and I'm like, these are my people. And I just felt like every place I went, they were trying to scam me.
Uganda on a motorcycle is not on your radar.
Well, there's so many places I really would like to go. And for me...
Even if you could get married in Uganda?
Are you asking me if I could get married in Uganda, would I go? Yeah, because really that's what I'm focused on, is trying to get married before I die.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Isn't that what we're all
That's what I assumed.
Right?
It's true.
I've had so much luck with meeting people that, to go back to your... and of course, there's, just different levels of, not even different levels, just different ways of people being kind and welcoming. And I think, sometimes when people describe places like that, or describe places like sort of in the opposite of that spectrum, it's like sometimes missing like a little bit of context around what, how people all over the world show hospitality and are kind.
Yeah.
I mean, even in Europe, like I spent quite a bit of time there just traveling around, and I thought a lot of the retail workers and, servers and everything were extremely rude, but, European friends of mine were like, yeah, well, this isn't America. Like, that's not how we do things, and we're not expecting that. And so, I think a lot of it is expectations, and I think a lot of it is...
So people in Europe don't expect the people that wait on them to be polite. They just expect rudeness,
it's more of what I was interpreting as rudeness, as being a lack of that overly performative, U.S. service industry. Okay. Like, oh, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah,
If it wasn't active rudeness, it was just like, this is what I am as a person, and here
Exactly. You go. But, expectations matter, and I think...
Yeah, performative service, that's an interesting
It's coming
phrase.
from my own work in the service industry and having...
Yes, I know. You told me all about,
performer, because, I'm not...
I think, weren't you really a mean barista? Didn't you tell me you were a really mean barista?
I definitely left some things to be desired on the customer service end, I think. I'll admit to that, so...
Because I think I said I would be afraid to have you wait on me. I'd be scared.
I would have been nice to you, Grace.
Well, going back to that whole idea of, finding nice people everywhere, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I feel like, you remind me of this old friend of mine from high school. He was the kind of person that would just do shit because he felt like it, and it always worked out. Do you know what I mean? And it was because he didn't have any expectations or fears. And it sounds like the same thing. You just do these things and you're like, yeah, it's going to work out. And then you meet people and it happens that way. And sometimes, and I am just such I plan too much. I think too much. And so that I think maybe doesn't lead me to the situations like you might have.
Yeah, I've definitely reaped a lot of benefits from being super open. Like some might, judge that as being too open, in terms of my own personal safety and things like that. But, I tend to tell the stories that are like sort of poking fun at myself, or that were really extreme in the sense that it was like, wow, this was so wild. What a great time. But I also had some extreme lows, I think traveling for me is just a space of extremes. And, there were definitely times where it was dangerous and I didn't have a sense of whimsy about it. And it was just really, really, and just emotional difficulties as well, apart from physical safety concerns. So.
Were there points where you got really lonely or just felt like really alone?
I have like a general looming sense of aloneness in general, so I don't know that that's like magnified or not by traveling.
Okay.
Usually when I'm traveling, like I don't want to come home, even if I'm having a bad time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, when Luis and I went to Guatemala a couple of years ago, I don't think we wanted to come back. It was just, I think he felt so at home there, and it was just so beautiful. And it was so nice to meet the people that he had, fostered with. I don't think we wanted to come back.
You think Luis actually felt, even though he left when he was 3? Or
No, he was 9 months.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, but you think he actually felt at home there?
He said he felt really connected, I mean, everyone looked like him, although it was interesting because he for sure was one of the taller people there. And I was like, well, it's probably because of good nutrition. I mean, a lot of the, it's a very, very impoverished country, and the nutrition might not be what it could be. So, but no, he definitely did. And getting together with the family that fostered him for 9 months. I mean, of course he didn't remember them, right? But at the same time, it was, he had seen pictures and they were just so welcoming, and it was just such a meaningful thing. And I just think he felt really connected to the country in general.
You wonder if there's like, we're like migrating birds or something, that there is some kind of magnetic force or.
Well, it's weird.
Hidden GPS.
Yeah, it's weird because I've had that feeling, I have a bunch of cousins on my dad's side, and we all were apart for like 20 years, right? We just didn't, for various reasons. And when we started getting together again, it was like after my grandmother's funeral, when we started getting together again, it felt physical to me. I felt like this physical thing. It was really weird. I don't know what it is.
Went to London one time, and on the cab ride from the airport, as we got toward the center of town, I literally felt like I've been here before. I had like a deja vu thing. I'm sure there's a connection there that I don't have any idea what it is, but it was, I'm not prone to that sort of thinking, but I did. I felt like that. I've been here.
What sort of emotions did you have attached to that feeling of having been there? Were they like good? Like, did it feel good to be back because of it? Or, I mean, not back in the sense that, but yeah.
So what's next, Amie?
What's next?
And can I ask,
Sure.
Do you think you're possibly a hippie?
I think Grace, knowing me from like a work setting, would say no. I tend to be very, I don't want to split myself out like that. Like I'm two different people, because I'm not. But I think that.
But you sort of are. I noticed that at work. You're, like when you talk about work, you sound completely different. I definitely noticed that about you when we worked together. No doubt.
Yeah, I mean, that's my lived experience with it, too. I don't feel like I'm being inauthentic at work. I feel like I'm being myself in that space, and I feel like this is, myself in a more personal space, and especially since we're talking about traveling. I think that's part of, like, why I'm having this, like, sort of reaction, because I'm like, oh my God, because I spend most of my time working these days just because of the pandemic, and I don't think I've seen this side of myself socially either. So I have some, sort of insecurities going on.
Yeah, well, I'm joking, of course, but I, there is that vibe about you, like people I knew in the '60s, in a good way.
Yeah, I'm not offended by it at all. I just bringing up the other part.
Yeah, I think he's complimenting you.
Yeah, I'm
definitely taking it that way, and I appreciate it.
I mean, I am always really admiring of people who just seem like they can do what they want to do, and they just do it. I mean, I am very, very envious of that,
But yeah, I mean, I have this huge zest for life. Like, I really want to fit in as much as I possibly can. I don't know, what's... I don't know how long I'm going to live or any of that. And I just don't want to regret having this amazing opportunity. And there's so many places in the world. And to be closed off to it, at least, in spirit or intellectually, I think is would be a mistake for me personally and what I feel drawn to.
So do you have anything in mind? Do you have a place you need to go, you want to go?
I'm going to Vietnam with my father in late January
cool.
to mid-February. Yeah, it's going to be his first time back since 1975. Yeah, when he left. Yeah.
Not since he left. Since he left? Wow. So, Amie, have you been there before? Like on your travels?
No, I've avoided going because I wanted to go for my first time with my dad.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
That's
so
great.
that was... I did think about it when I was in Thailand because I could have just popped over there, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
But no, that's been the most important trip, I guess, since I was a child, in terms of trips that I wanted to take, and it's finally coming up. Yeah.
Wow, I wonder how is he gonna feel about being back?
I mean,
that's gonna be massive.
I think the emotional aspect of travel is the most unpredictable. I think people focus on events and things, catastrophic things or crime, but people's emotional reactions, I think, loom very big. But very quietly, for these experiences. So
that's your next big trip.
Yeah, that's my next big trip. I had a time, where I was planning a trip to Southern Africa, so South Africa and also Namibia and Botswana, and I always wanted to go there, but
Antarctica.
It's just been on the.
Have you ever thought about like a nice carnival cruise? Like the Carnival Princess?
I think that would be, I don't fault people for doing the all-inclusives and loving the cruises and everything. I think it's fine. First of all, boat-wise, I've been on several boats. I hate ferries so much, but I've taken them. But, it's got like a floating coffin vibe to me, just in general. And so I love to avoid, like, ships.
Coffins.
And also like the whole all-inclusive thing. I just, when you start off mentioning like the Bali trip to do the yoga teacher training, I almost feel like that wasn't an authentic experience.
That wasn't a real
I
trip.
had very limited vacation time and I spent the entire time there. And so
Yeah.
I almost feel like, did I really... Yes, I was there and I experienced it and I experienced local people who are working at the resort and the food, but I don't know that was like
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Luis and I took a cruise, and the floating coffin thing really resonates with me because, being the fearful person that I am about things like that, I would wake up in the middle of the night, look out the porthole, and all I would see is these massive waves, and we're in the middle of nothing, and just start freaking out. But yeah, I mean, we spent as little time on the ship as we could. We took a lot of the trips, like that's where we got to swim with the dolphins and with the stingrays. And, we went to Key West and Bahamas and all of that stuff. I mean, there the poverty is just on full display, and you're in the midst of this tourist experience where it's all expenses and all you can eat and, blah, blah, blah. And you really...
That's the opposite of an Amie trip.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I mean, it's like you can stay in the mall and then you can have your little excursion and go back to your mall.
Right. Whereas Amie goes into the middle of it. Amie gets into the culture, embedded into the culture.
I try to, a lot of that is, it's a lot of work that goes into that on my part, but also on the part of the people to be open to me and, welcome me into more than just like the sort of surface thing, which I think is hard for anybody in general to develop a relationship like that. So
yeah, like it's like a shopping trip if you go on one of those tours where you're just going city to city and to city, like, okay, let's go in Ann Taylor, let's go in Macy's, let's go. It's like, what are you really getting? All you're getting is like the top line, like tourist experience. Right. Like, okay, if you go to Rome, you have to see the Vatican, and that's all, I don't know. I could just watch it on TV if I were going to do that,
We took Rick Steves, know him? He's the PBS guy. We took one of those and went across Europe and And that was the kind of the point. We checked off Stonehenge and the Colosseum. And once I'd done that, I thought, I don't know, I never want to do that again.
Yeah.
I never want to do anything like that.
I mean, in Rome, our hotel, and we stayed in there for a few days, our hotel was like down the street from the Colosseum. So to me, like walking back and forth and just walking past the Colosseum every day, that was so much cooler than getting off a bus and like going in for half an hour, you know.
Right. Go sit and have a cup of coffee and watch the people.
Yeah.
And that's so, Amie, if I went to Thailand or wherever, if I just decided to go, what would you tell me to do? How would you say, do it Amie style?
Amie style. Well,
Amie style. Go to the airport, get on the bus, get off in the middle of town.
Yeah, wherever, right?
Yeah, you know, it's like a very openness and relationship based kind of way that I go about things. But I think that, you know, apart from like sort of laundry listing out, like do this and don't do that, because, you know, the other thing that I think about too now that I didn't really consider before is how lucky I am to be like very healthy, you know, relatively, and very able to nonchalantly just eat street food and not have to be concerned.
That's cool.
About it. You know, I mean, not concerned in the sense that I generally go in and say, okay, I'm probably going to get sick. So, you know, I'll factor that into the experience and, you know, I take it in stride. But, you know, there's a lot of people that can't really afford to do that. And I think that they have a right to travel and, you know, have a good experience. So I think when I give out tips, it's like I have my own ideal of what I think is authentic to me. But over the last few years, I've tried to be more, I guess, less judgmental about the routes that people choose to go when they're traveling, because there's thousands of considerations that everybody has to take into account that I've never had to even give a thought to. It's not as glamorous. Even, you know, I have tons of stories and I like to, you know, play up the glam or the stupidity of myself or whatever.
Well, so what was the most glamorous thing that you ever experienced? I don't know if I heard that story. What was super glamorous?
I think the most glamorous was I can meet up with this friend, and then once I was like, I'm gonna meet up with this friend, her cousin knew this London-based DJ who had a penthouse and was going to be DJing his own party.
Oh my gosh.
So I spent New Year's Eve, and he had a pool and everything, and it was wild. And I was like, wow.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it was awesome. So that's probably the most glamorous.
I'll take that. I'll take that for glamour.
Yeah, I saw that movie though, and there were people that disappeared before it was over.
You know, I'm sure a lot of people, I don't know, I don't want to make it seem as though it's like, you know, travel's the safest thing. I mean, there's people that I guess will end on a dark note, but that really, you know, don't come out of the other side without
intact,
great trauma and whatnot, or sometimes with their lives, you know. So it's serious, you know, you have to take it seriously. But yeah, the question that you asked up top about, you know, I think it was like, what does travel mean to me, or what is travel to me?
Well, I always enjoyed it. There's a buzz I get from being somewhere I've never been before, and I always liked it. But like I said, from the time I was probably 25 until now, it's all business and standard tourism. And I wish I had taken more time to do the real, you know, when I was in my 20s, I did the classic Volkswagen van across America.
Oh.
That's so cool, and that's traveling. It doesn't have to be international.
I hitchhiked across the country.
You did?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You hitchhike across the whole country?
Yeah.
Wow.
You'll like this, Grace. There was a thing back then, companies would advertise for you to move a car.
I've heard about that. I think people still do that.
I don't know if it still exists, but back then...
I think it does.
You know, drive cross country. It was a way to get cross country for free. You didn't get paid for it.
Yeah.
Had to get an international truck driver's license or, you know, international commerce license.
Really?
I went to this little dingy office somewhere like down in the dockyards in San Francisco. They said, well, you got to have a doctor approval on this. And I said, well, I don't know any doctors here. I don't have that.
Doctor's approval.
Right over in the next room. So I go over in the next room, and there was this doctor. I don't know if he was real or not, and he just stamped the thing. And then I drove from San Francisco to Philadelphia.
Huh.
Because it's me,
Yeah.
I had to see how fast I could do it.
Yeah, it took you like 10 hours, right?
Well, it was like 44 or something. But I'd drive as far as I could and then sleep in the back seat for 2 hours and then get up. And so that was, I had little adventures like that. So I always enjoyed.
Well, the hitchhiking thing, though, were you on your own?
Yeah.
Wow.
Really?
That was a thing that would have been 1970. And you didn't think about it then. That was not a question. And
Yeah.
everybody was doing it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I even remember, like, when I was in my young teens that I had friends who would still do it.
Walked down the street and put my thumb out, and it took me days and days. A lot of strange people, but I never felt threatened or anything.
Well, so what do you mean by strange? Like,
Yeah, I want to know more.
Yeah, I think of like planes, trains, and automobiles, when they're waiting for that guy's son to show up and he shows up in the truck with his wife.
Oh, he's spitting? Yeah, I remember that.
I don't know. It's hard for me to remember specific people back then, but.
You just remember the feeling like I'm in the car with a really strange person?
Yeah, they're mostly concerned with their own lives and they just nice enough to pick up this guy on the side of the road. And
yeah.
So yeah, that was a big adventure. I went to Florida for the launch of Apollo 13.
Wow!
Because that was a thing I had to see.
Wow, that's cool.
Kind of a nerd. I didn't have much money at all, so I lived for a week on a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread.
Oh my God!
And I was so sick by the end of it. I didn't want any more peanut butter or bread for the rest of my life.
How old were you when you did that?
That would have been right after college.
Yeah, those are adventures.
I've had little adventures, and then the adventures stopped with a house and
a
wife and a kid, and avoid that, Amy. Don't get involved.
Avoid human connection.
A house of spice and kids. Well, I'm 0 for 3 now, so.
Well, it's really funny. There's a photographer I work with in town, and she leads the life. I'm on Facebook with her, right? So I see a lot of what she does. And so she leads the life that I feel like I would have been leading if I didn't have a child. And I do, believe me, and I do not regret having a child in any way, shape, or form. But sometimes, like, I look at her, what she's doing, I'm like, oh, I would have been doing that. You know what I mean? Right. It's funny because it definitely takes you out of the stream of, certain kinds of experience. But, luckily Luis is a good traveler. We have a lot of great vacations together, and we've explored a lot of cities and countries and, so it's good.
Keep telling yourself that, Grace.
I know. I've ruined my life.
Oh.
I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way at all.
Of course not. I don't have a button.
Yeah. Well, maybe that was the button. You trying to tell me that my life sucked.
Well, thank you, Amy.
Yeah, that was really interesting. All right. Great to talk to you.
It's so great to talk to you, too.
Another episode of Charbroiled Chats comes to a close. But rest assured, whatever you would like to talk about, we are listening. So go ahead, tweet us at CharbroilC or email us at charbroiledchats@gmail.com. Of course, we'd love it if you'd head over to iTunes or YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts and write a review of Charbroiled Chats. And please, subscribe, like, follow, comment, and most of all, tell all your friends about Charbroiled Chats. See you next time.